A couple of weeks back, Final Fantasy XIV's newest expansion got a name, a teaser, and some promises. A whole lot of people apparently rushed right back into the game because they couldn't wait to enjoy 6 months of the end of expansion content lull. Back in my video about Dawntrail, I suggested that CBU3 really needed to knock it out of the park in order to convince people to come back to the game, but I kinda have to rescind that sentiment. If Evercold is even the tiniest bit better than Dawntrail, all will be forgiven. Hype does weird things to people. Not long ago, Guild Wars 3 got its teaser trailer mixed up with B-roll footage for Highguard that I guess someone just had lying around. It seriously looks like any other Unreal Engine fantasy game, and most of the team behind the original 2 Guild Wars games is not going to be working on this one. It's kind of a weird choice to start development of a new game in a new engine in one of the most expensive genres and perhaps the worst economic environment that's been seen in decades, but I guess who cares? It's a franchise that people recognize, and hype does weird things to people. I could go on forever and ever about the perils of hype and how hype marketing has been meticulously designed and developed to exploit the same exact things that social media's Skinner box engagement algorithms have.
Wake the fuck up, samurai. We have
a brisket and some ribs.
But on some level, I think that everyone naturally comes to understand what hype is. Even chronic consumers who get excited for every new release of a thing with a brand name that they recognize, at some point they understand that they're just pantomiming the enthusiasm that they once had in order to recall what it was once like to have optimism. And, of course, to socially cohere with people whose defining traits are the things that they purchase. Hype lets you fit right in. But what about its antithesis, anti-hype? I can think of no better recent example of anti-hype than Mixtape. For a week or 2 or 3, it dominated the attention economy. It was everywhere and everybody had to make a video about it. Everyone joined in on the cause, dunking on some stupid trash that they were never going to play and never going to buy and wouldn't have known about if not for the frenzy. Anti-hype does weird things to people. But there's something a bit more sinister going on here. There are many critiques lobbed at Mixtape, plenty of which I certainly agree with. Its animation style is a somehow uglier ripoff of Yick, and it also ripped the anachronistic dialogue from that game too. It's pretty weird. Mixtape is the kind of vacuous, derivative, trying to draw blood from pop culture style of story that could only possibly be told by millennials' most annoying contribution to culture. Eat the rich, not me though.
It's fucking disgusting.
It's living testament to the fact that if you've got friends with deep pockets, they'll get your name out there. But one critique that's lobbed at the game is the fact that, well, it isn't a game. I'm sure at least 3 other people have brought up how linear visual novels or walking simulators still fall under the umbrella of the medium, despite the fact that they don't really require player input or skill. But there was something that I noticed in the tone of this critique of Mixtape. And it's something that I've seen in a totally different medium of art. And that would be the fascination with true cult. Spend any amount of time in the extreme metal scene and you'll see this phrase. It is completely inescapable. Long, long ago, black metal was not a discovered genre. It was underground. It was authentic, it had a defined sound, it had a defined look, it had a defined ethos. They despised Christianity, they were misanthropic Satanists and devil worshippers who lived in opposition to broader society. It had a thing for church burnings and killing people, and they weren't being tongue-in-cheek about any of this. They were extremely authentic about all of that. It was a small scene obsessed with purity, authenticity, and anti-commercialism. Hence the notion of whether or not someone was true, misspelling the U as a V for largely aesthetic reasons. For a scene that was intentionally exclusionary, passing this bar, proving that you were true, is kind of a big deal.
In 1991, things became even more shocking when Mayhem frontman Dead committed suicide. There were reports that Euronymous photographed the body for the sleeve of the Mayhem album Dawn of the Black Hearts. Other myths grew. such as Dead's brain was boiled in a stew and eaten by Euronymous, who also made necklaces out of his skull.
However much of all that is mythos and however much of all that is true, these people were serious about their scene and are serious about their scene. See, I'm not drawing a comparison here between true cult gamers who like their games to require you to press a button, or who like games that don't spend every waking second trying to look like a crappy, pretentious short film made by Wes Anderson. No, rather, what matters is what happened to the label of true.
All right! Do you people want to hear some heavy metal?
Tell me why I'm stuck as a virgin with rage. Tell me why I so need.
I can fix anything except that.
Metal is dead.
I have a boyfriend.
Because the black metal scene still exists today as it was. Authentic black metal is small in the way that it's always been, anti-Christian in the way that it's always been, and exclusionary in the way that it's always been. But lots of bands and musicians love the sound without the rest of the scene, so they take the goodies and they infuse them elsewhere. Lately, I've been loving this band Together to the Stars, mostly because of this riff. But you see, they're black gaze, which is to say, black metal-infused shoegaze. Years back, I was all about Panopticon because of this riff. But you see, that's Appalachian-infused blackened folk metal. Winterhorde is symphonic black metal, whatever that means, but, you know, how can I not love this? And one of my favorite bands of all time, no longer among us, Cormorant, infused blackened licks with progressive sensibilities, which brought me this. And none of those are true. All of it's poseur, all of it's fake. But here's the thing, I don't care, and neither do the black metal purists. I'm not true, and I'm not bothered by it, and they are not bothered that I am not true, as long as I don't try to force them to listen to things that they regard as impure, or try to insert myself into their scene.
Just give it a chance, it's not so bad. Sir, fun. Oh, there is no God. Listen to his guitar. Oh.
But the music industry is really bothered by things like that. And out of that comes the use of true cult as a pejorative, as a term of ironic derision. It's a joke that your sound is similar to black metal, but that it doesn't meet its meticulous purity standards. And this kind of thing might sound innocuous until you realize that it cleaves a shapeless block of music consumers into a defined, polarized dichotomy: gatekeepers and anti-gatekeepers. Anti-gatekeepers can be funneled towards something that lampoons true cult, and they'll huff their farts about how they're working to push the boundaries of music as they hand over their money to the music industry. Gatekeepers can be funneled towards something that titles itself as true, and then they'll huff their farts about how much they're helping to keep the sound unmolested as they hand over their money to the music industry. It doesn't matter whether either of these bands or these groups are meaningfully true or untrue. It is a pointless distinction that the actual black metal scene doesn't see a reason to care about, and it's being fought over by people that the black metal scene would all consider to be impure. By setting up this kind of dichotomy, you can take people who have no actual skin in the game, and you can force them to take a side for no reason except that it's an excuse to yell at the people on the other side. Bringing it back, bringing it all together, putting Mixtape in the spotlight is an intentional effort to create a partisan argument over this otherwise horrendously forgettable pile of pastiche. The intent of thrusting it into the spotlight, of shoving tons of cash at the games media so that they all suddenly start talking about it, is precisely to get a bunch of people on YouTube to also all suddenly start talking about it, mainly to shit on it for a week and a half.
Listen, stories are great, but you seem to be forgetting that this is a video game. And the nice part about a video game is that after the cutscene, you get to play the game. If I cannot play the game, it's not a game anymore, is it?
By creating gatekeepers and anti-gatekeepers, you have these two blocks that then mobilize. Anti-gatekeepers buy the game in order to pwn the gatekeepers, and the gatekeepers buy a true game in order to pwn the anti-gatekeepers, or that was kind of the plan until it came out that this game's funding has ties to the Ellisons, so that faction, the anti-gatekeepers, didn't do its part and refunded the game on Steam because its total playtime is less than 2 hours. Oh, just kidding though, on a second look at the Steam page, this faction's desire to pwn the chuds and anachronistically romanticize about an era that none of them actually lived through has won out over the desire to not support bombing children's schools. Wait a minute. How is this thing mostly positive if the most helpful reviews are all negative?
Bonjour, Mr. Ellison.
Are they starting to notice?
Oui. Your involvement is no longer a secret.
Quick, spend more money to astroturf this thing.
Understood. As you wish, Mr. Ellison.
Anyways, Mixtape was a great excuse for true gamers to go and buy Pragmata, because the people most likely to buy modern games on release are also the ones most likely to complain about the lacking quality of modern games. But oh, speaking of Pragmata, you remember how there was a big controversy about that game? I don't actually remember what it was about. I just remember people were arguing about something stupid. But that whole thing, was whipped up to factionalize the game. Factionalization moves sales, both to the product and to its competitors, because it makes people feel like they're participants in some great cultural struggle, even though in reality they're just handing money over to a faceless corporate industry, playing them like a fiddle. I remember Gone Home. I remember being annoyed that it won a bunch of awards that it clearly didn't deserve, that it very clearly got boosted thanks to what looked obvious at the time, like a fusion of nepotism and palm greasing. I remember when Dear Esther did the same thing. I remember when Her Story did the same thing. I remember a ton of cases like this, and in each one, I remember being confused as to why people cared so much, because Gone Home was in 2013, and by that point, it was already broadly understood that the games media was horrendously, laughably, transparently corrupt, immature, and unprofessional. That was 6 years after Gerstmann had been fired because he gave Kane and Lynch a 6. How many examples have there been in the time since, including that great shitstorm of shitstorms Gamergate, to demonstrate that the games media is corrupt, vulnerable to corporate capture, and so poorly capitalized that its integrity is cheaper to buy out than even a sitting U.S. member of Congress? Like, have some integrity, people, my God!
Senator Robert Menendez placed the blame on his wife Nadine.
And yet, still, the people who most often impress that the games media should be ignored curiously can't seem to help themselves from constantly screaming about every last AstroTurf pile of trash that the media props up. You might think that they would recognize the cycle and advise their fan bases break free from it so that we stop seeing these pointless culture war factionalizations for no reason except to drive a corrupt industry to greater sales. But then again, anti-hype does weird things to people.
But as you get older, you're more than happy with a remastered greatest hits compilation. And that's what Mixtape is, and it's great, and I recommend it.
Alright, nice try, lady. Or whatever you are. I'm supposed to think you're a nun, but I know you're really some kind of big ugly demon, so let's have it.
Pokemon Go!
Aha! I knew it! big ugly demon.
But I'd try to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
Kind of sexy, though, in a weird way.
One upside of this video being a month or so late, June was just kind of busy for me and I fell a bit out of the habit, is that I can enjoy some good old-fashioned Coda. One of the more frustrating things that I hear about Mixtape is the insistence that it's not an indie game because it's got massive donors that allowed them to license music, and that it got funding from the government. Brutal Legend here also had a whole lot of money to license huge metal songs and to feature celebrity appearances like Ozzy, Tim Curry, and Minecraft Steve. So is Brutal Legend not an indie game? I mean, Psychonauts was definitely an indie game, as was Beethoven and Dinosaur's prior title. Double Fine itself was an indie studio until Microsoft bought them in 2019, but does all that not count because Brutal Legend had a big budget? Is the problem that there was a publisher for the game, and if so, does that mean that Yik, Valhalla, and World of Horror all are not indie titles because they're all published by Yizbird? Is there some kind of financial cutoff, a certain amount of funding that makes something not indie if you get more money than that? No, I mean, the reality is that indie is an ill-defined colloquial term. And if there is a true cult phenomenon in gaming, it's the idea that if a game isn't made by self-funded bedroom devs, that it is somehow not indie. Yes, there's a few examples of zero-budget passion projects out there, like Yumi Nikki, Cave Story, Stardew Valley, Lisa. And there's games like Alien Hominid or Undertale or Omori where the creators monetized their prior notoriety to fund the development. But for most people, those circumstances are just not going to be the case. Whether you're trying to fund just yourself or you're paying for a whole team, you're gonna need money. Crowdfunding generally doesn't generate enough revenue, and most of the successful crowdfunding cases like Wrath of the Righteous, well, actually, that's when a studio crowdfunds a small sum, and then uses that sum, the success of that campaign, in order to negotiate larger publishing deals, because it's proof that there's an audience, that the studio is reliable, and that there's a good return to be made on the publisher's investment, which is the whole reason that they give studios money. And so if you're serious about trying to make one of these long-term creative projects, well, yeah, you're going to try to get as much public or even private grant money that you can. You're going to try to court a publisher because having to worry about being able to afford necessities, and especially being able to afford health insurance, is a real concern for the vast majority of people, excepting, of course, the types of people who are generally able to self-fund. The affluent and the scions of affluence. Since 2022, when the era of low-no interest ended, grants and publishing deals have become selective and less lucrative as development costs have increased. The net result explains why the indie scene has been seemingly beset by an endless deluge of plastic pastel-colored narratives. The only people who can afford to self-publish these games are going to be the people who don't have to worry about the cost of pretty much anything. It's not to say that everyone who's able to do that isn't putting in work. Obviously, Toby Fox's meteoric rise is not somehow undeserved. And it's not to say that studios having to clamor for grants, publishers, and patrons is somehow foolproof, as Mixtape itself obviously shows. But the reason Mixtape is so inauthentic has nothing to do with its funding structure. It's inauthentic for the same reason that Life is Strange and Silent Hill: The Short Message are inauthentic. These are all games in which middle-aged salarymen attempt to pantomime the feelings, mannerisms, and speech patterns of teenagers living in countries that they themselves are not from, during time periods that they themselves were not teenagers in. So the end result is a boatload of tropes, anachronisms, and millennial writing.
I just move shit with my freaking mind!
Nevertheless, Mixtape is an indie game. It's also inauthentic, shallow, pretentious, vapid, and vacuous. These things are not mutually exclusive, and indie studios should absolutely value their ability to pay their employees by getting grants and publishing deals over staying true to appease people on the internet.
So that's what we made, and we brought to all the publishers, and they all passed on it.